once again, if you could get a small improvement for your business, it's going to save you an hour a week. That's 50 hours a year. If that hour a week is per employee on the shop floor, and you got 20 employees on the shop floor, that's 1,000 hours a year.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another episode of Dynaway Dialogues. I'm Jesse Zadanek, U.S. Business Development Manager for Dynaway, and I'm really happy to have Robert Jolliffe with us today. I hope I didn't mess that up, Robert.
No, you got it right.
Robert is a Microsoft Gold partner with Sabre Limited, and he's an expert, and Sabre is an expert in manufacturing in the Business Central world. We haven't really talked about that a lot on Dynaway Dialogues yet, but we're definitely going to do that today. So I'm excited about it. Thanks for joining us, Robert. How are you?
No, thanks for having me. I'm great. I'm always happy to talk. Like my mom says, like talking is the number one thing I'm great at. So
yeah, I get that sometimes too. So let's jump into it. I want to learn a little bit about Sabre and about your journey. Robert, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started?
Sure. If you look at our website, I have this story on our About Us page. My father and two of my uncles owned manufacturing businesses when I was growing up, and many child labor laws were broken, having me start working at my dad's company when I was like 13 or 14 years old. So I jokingly say I have 40 years of manufacturing experience. I went to school to be a manufacturing engineer. I got a mechanical engineering degree from University of Toronto. I'm Canadian. Don't blame me. It's anyway, and I got into manufacturing. I was a manufacturing engineer for a couple of years, and then I got hired by this company. They had just bought something called ERP. People who worked there didn't really know what it was. I didn't really know what it was. I was always good at IT. I was always the guy at school that if the printer didn't work or WordPerfect didn't format something the way they wanted, they would come to me. And I liked it. I had a part-time job in the summers as an IT support person. And this was the old days when you carried disks around, floppy disks with you. And I discovered this thing called ERP, and it was Infor Visual ERP, which is still sold by Infor. They sold only to manufacturing companies, and they had sold a bunch of them in Ontario, and I got hired by this company, and I worked there for 4 years. At the end of that 4 years, I did virtually no engineering. They wanted me to do engineering and IT. Thank God I did almost no engineering for them. And I became their IT manager. I learned networking, and I also learned the visual ERP system and a bit of programming, crystal report writing, like all that stuff that you needed to do. And people saw that I went to the user groups and I talked, and people recognized that I knew what I was talking about. So people asked me, would you work on the side? And that grew into enough people asking me that it made sense to just hang my own shingle and start my business out of my basement, different basement than this one. And over the years, I had about 200-ish visual ERP customers that I did consulting for. I started just myself. By 2008, I had about 10 employees, but Infor is very restrictive and I couldn't sell the product. We did IT services because I had that IT background. And what ended up happening was Microsoft approached me. And after that first discussion, because they thought they were going to talk to me about IT services, they realized I had this ERP background. They said, why don't you sell Dynamics? I said, I don't know. Why don't I sell Dynamics? And they recruited me to sell Great Plains.
Oh, right. I actually work for a Great Plains company as well.
Yeah. So I was recruited to sell Great Plains. In 2008, I started selling Great Plains. Now, you may remember 2008, there was a financial problem.
Yes.
So just as I started getting my first marketing campaign going, the Lehman Brothers went out of business. The great financial crisis began. It was a total disaster. So I fell back into the visual manufacturing ERP space for a little while I tried to get Great Plains going. And as I was trying to market Great Plains, I was losing every deal to Dynamics NAV. I just kept losing these Great Plains opportunities. I closed a couple, but NAV was eating my lunch. So I went back to Microsoft in 2013 and I said, why did you tell me to sell Great Plains? NAV is eating my lunch. And they said, oh, you should sell NAV. So in 2013, we kind of converted the business to a NAV partner. We had a couple of Great Plains customers. We had a whole bunch of visual ERP customers, but Infor is quite litigious. And I decided, I'd probably be better if I stopped with the Infor visual ERP business line because we weren't official. And we started selling NAV. And by 2017, we had developed a fixed fee implementation approach that was fairly successful. And this was, I started this because I had read an article on LinkedIn that said time and material billing is unethical. And I'd had clients who approached me and said, look, if I build my clients the way you did, I would never have any business. I have to tell them what it's going to cost and I have to deliver to them. And I said, well, that's hard to do because you guys change your mind all the time and you constantly are telling us to do different stuff. And he's like, well, I still don't get it. I don't get why. And I kept thinking about it. I'm a Lean Six Sigma guy. So I'm thinking from a Lean Six Sigma point of view, how could I do this? So by 2017, we'd worked out a process. By 2018, we had stopped doing in-person implementations. Now, if you think about the timing of that, it was very good because Microsoft came out with Business Central, which is Dynamics NAV upgraded for the cloud, and subscription-based, serverless, just pay your monthly subscription, and all you have to do is start using it. By 2020, of course, COVID began, and we were perfectly positioned in the market with the fixed fee, with remote implementation, with a modern cloud-based ERP system, and we haven't looked back. So if you talk to other Dynamics NAV partners, some of them started in 93, 95, 2001. We're new to the game. And I think we've finally outgrown that. Like they take us seriously now, but we are very well recognized in the market. Like a lot of competitors come up to me and say, I don't know how you do it with a fixed fee, but we're very profitable. We do it very well because we use manufacturing techniques and concepts in making our processes repetitive and cutting waste and inefficiency out of it for both us and the customer. So customers have very high success rate. Customers really like working with us because all we do is manufacturing. So we really get their business. Like we completely understand what they do, and we're selective. So if you are not a manufacturing business that we feel we would be successful with, we will suggest somebody else. And yesterday, I think a bakery contacted us, and we don't do food and batch manufacturing because it's got too many regulations that my team are not familiar with. And I know another partner, and I gave them the name of the other partner and did an introduction because I want that sale that I make to be very successful. And it's more important to me that I have a successful sale than I have a sale.
That's fascinating. A couple of different ways. Actually, on the business side, I think it's fascinating that once you got in kind of the exact wrong time.
Yeah.
And then, but you didn't stop. You kept trying to figure out how to make the business work. And then because you did that, you landed on the exact right time to make, to be available when the market went to the cloud and fixed fee. That's a fascinating study. You should
luck hit me
you
both
should teach
ways,
it.
Okay? I got luck. I got hit by luck coming both ways. So it was lucky. The second luck hit was the good luck hit. The first luck hit was the bad luck hit. But yeah.
There's a Seinfeld episode where he goes, "You know who I am? Even Steven, you got back to even there." So that's interesting. Well, good. That's a fascinating story. So tell me a little bit. You said you only do manufacturing and not necessarily batch manufacturing. But you're talking about the whole business, correct? So you do a full implementation, financials, and manufacturing.
Correct.
Mirrored
Our
together.
customers are manufacturing customers.
Okay.
What the rule of thumb tends to be that our preferred customer would be a single facility or single campus, or if they had multiple facilities, those facilities act independently. They're not supplying each other. The supply chain is relatively simple. We've had a couple customers who are more complicated where they have distribution resource planning, but that's unusual. They're discrete manufacturers. We're very good at engineer to order.
Okay.
Now, engineer to order doesn't really need Dynaway. Their customers need Dynaway.
Yeah.
But we're also, obviously, we're good at regular production and job shop manufacturing. In fact, one of the areas of specialty that we have, there are 3 other partners in North America who do this, is a product called PrintViz. And PrintViz is it's for job shops that make printed products. And that could be a packaging, like a folding carton or a plastic bag. It could be a commercial printer that does posters or books or magazines or business cards. So that PrintViz product is actually one of the ways that we got to know Dynaway, because Dynaway is one of very few add-ons that have integrated into PrintViz. But we also had independently heard about you guys because we were always researching for really good add-ons for manufacturing companies, and manufacturing companies need preventive maintenance.
Gotcha. That's wonderful. I'm glad we're finally getting our name out there in the BC world as well. Yeah, I love customer stories. Do you have any any stories you could tell us where, a customer came to you with a big hurdle and tried to get you to help, and you were successful there?
Oh, I mean, like one of the things that we run into all the time are what I call a rescue mission.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of respect for my competitors. So I hope some of them don't take this the wrong way, but knowing how the modules of the manufacturing system work and what their capabilities are is only half what a small manufacturing company needs, because the smaller manufacturing companies are generally made up of staff who have come from the shop floor and been promoted into their position, come from more entry-level positions within the office and have been promoted in their position. And the business knows how to make the parts they sell, but they don't have they're not supply chain professionals. They don't have a IT department with business analysts. They don't have people who are Lean Six Sigma experts, generally, right? When they're smaller.
Right.
It's when they get large enough that they start to grow into that, but then they should be looking at F&O or finance and supply chain as an ERP product, because if they're big enough to have a department that handles that kind of process improvement and has those capabilities, they're at a different level. And I think the average ERP partner, their consultants understand what the software will do, but they don't understand what the customer does.
Yeah.
And in manufacturing in particular, it's because there's so many variations, and there's different types of manufacturers and sub-verticals and specialization, that the ERP consultant comes in and needs the customer to explain their business. Like, explain, why do you have a fixed amount of scrap when you run production? I don't understand what that is, right? And I'm going to walk in and say, "Oh, are you an extrusion company? Do you have a destructive testing requirement for your product?" Because I have a manufacturing background, and my team have a manufacturing background. We are very rarely hiring our competitors' employees to come work for us. And I don't think we have anybody right now who worked for a competitor. We are hiring industry people. So I'm hiring like a person who is a production control manager and ran a production shop, or a person who was an engineer to order project manager who ran engineer to order projects for their business, or a person who was in purchasing in the supply chain. And I'm bringing those people in, and I'm saying, I'm going to train you to learn how Business Central works, because that's relatively easy to do, but it's very hard to teach them to understand manufacturing principles and concepts, and what's a safety stock and why do I need it, and what's a reorder point, what's a stock point, where should I create items, and where should I have routings. And honestly, I just run into a lot of customers who come to us, somebody's helped them implement, but the customer had to lead the consulting themselves. because the partner couldn't tell them this is how you should do this, and it's just a disaster. And we go in and we take a look at it. One of the classic ones is the customer says, I want to turn on all the features of warehousing. And the partner says, sure. And they turn them all on, and warehouse management workers and manufacturing companies are rarely disciplined.
Yeah.
They are usually, I'll grab what I need to make the parts. We got to get it out the door. It's all about getting stuff out the door. And then you turn on this super complex warehouse management capabilities that they have no idea how to do or have never done before. And they just crash and burn. And that's the kind of thing that will come to us, and we will help those clients.
Yeah. And just end up ignoring the software because they have to get stuff out of the door. I see it. Right. You'd be surprised. I do work in the F&O space, and you'd be surprised how many F&O customers are just like that as well. Obviously, the larger ones tend to have those people in place, but a lot of times they don't even on the F&O side. So I can feel your pain there.
Right. And I think what our specialty is because we only work with certain subcategories of manufacturing. Like you mentioned, we don't do process manufacturing, batch, chemical, pharmaceutical, food. Because we work with those sort of narrow focused groups of customers, when we walk in, like when we talk to them and I look at their website and we get an idea of what they do, we're typically saying, oh, you're just like Acme and Zebra and Alpha Corp. We've done projects for them before. We know most likely what you need. We're going to make recommendations based on best practices, and then together we'll figure out whether those are really what you needed in your business.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Okay, well, let's transition a little bit. I had here on my kind of outline that we talk a little bit about manufacturing trends. I think we've already done that a little bit, though. Do you see it?
I have a big one that I think is really important.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I think manufacturing is reshoring. And I think that is actually one of the most important things that's happening today, is that you had 25 years of offshoring of manufacturing from North America to other markets. Now, some of it went to Mexico, which is still North America, but a lot of it went to China and Asia. And absolutely. I think that's getting reshored. And I think that particularly with the pandemic and with the supply chain, how fragile the supply chain turned out to be, I think there are a lot of companies today that are saying, I want a secondary source of supply. Maybe I'm going to buy some stuff from China or India or nowadays Africa, but I want a secondary source of supply that's local, that if this happens again, I can turn them on and I can say, can you ramp up production for me? And that is definitely happening. I think that is a really good thing for North American manufacturing. And absolutely. I think that the talent pool is gutted because the people who were working in manufacturing 25 years ago, they're boomers, they're retiring, they're getting out of the industry, and the Gen X and millennials never saw it as a practical direction to go when they were in high school 10 years ago, because nobody does manufacturing in North America anymore. And I think we have a little bit of a crisis of talent. And this is part of the reason why I'm so excited by AI and the potential of it, because it can substitute for some of that talent loss, at least in the sense that maybe I need a human to do some of the work, but the human can rely on AI to back them up and help them make better judgment calls. And I'm really excited to see where that goes.
Yeah. I've actually seen a Big Five dossier on manufacturing, and they predicted by, I can't remember the exact date, but they predicted by 2030 or 2035 that the cost of reshoring things would actually be less than outsourcing them overseas because of AI, because of automation, because of shipping, global shipping, and those kinds of things. They predicted it, and I agree with you. I think that trend is here, and it's here to stay. So,
well, I also think the developing regions where we were outsourcing manufacturing to almost 30 years ago have developed a bit, right?
Yeah.
They're not as low cost as they were.
Yeah.
It's not as cheap to buy labor in some of these places anymore. I mean, there was a time when Japan was cheap labor. Japan is not cheap labor anymore. Nobody thinks about outsourcing anything to Japan. Things change, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to manage the risks because, global shipping is not, as we found out recently, always reliable.
Right.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Good. All right. Well, that kind of leads us, your take on the lack of trained resources here at home in the U.S. or North America leads us into Dynaway CONNECT, I think, a little bit. So one way we can augment that and train people up who are getting their feet wet and experienced leaders in this industry is through knowledge sharing. So I'm really excited about Dynaway CONNECT coming up in the spring, and you're going to be a speaker, of course, Robert. Tell us a little bit. Can you give us a preview of maybe what you're going to talk about and what's what your thoughts are?
It's my first attendance.
Yeah.
So it's going to be hard for me to say exactly what I'm going to talk about. And I'm one of those guys who can bob and weave with the discussion. So if I notice that there's sort of a trend, I can sort of insert that. I'll tell you what I do like to speak to at the different conferences that I'm asked to speak at. And one of them is that not all manufacturing is the same. I mentioned it already, that there are these different, what I refer to as modes of manufacturing. Some people call them industry classifications.
Yeah.
And there's subcategories, if you will, of manufacturing within the broader context of manufacturing. So there's make to order, make to stock, job shop, process, which we talked about, engineer to order, configure to order, and there's mixed mode as well, which is kind of like when more than one of them are blended together. And one thing I have found is that in the ecosystem of dynamics, that not every partner recognizes which of those is belongs to which industry or what their customer belongs to, and recognizes what they need. So if we go to preventive maintenance and asset management, we're going to find that in a make to order, make to stock environment, and probably a job shop in a lot of cases, that becomes an important element. And it's going to be different depending on which ones of those manufacturers you are in, process as well. So if you're make to order, make to stock, or process manufacturing, preventive maintenance is really important, because you're going to have to take a piece of equipment offline in order to repair it and perform services on it. But that piece of equipment should be operating at a high utilization. Like, the goal of the company is to make sure that is running well all the time, which means it's running all the time.
Yes.
Which means you have to have a good system for scheduling and managing, when am I going to do preventive maintenance on that equipment? And also, if there is a breakdown of that equipment, what did I have to do to that piece of equipment to do that repair? Is it an area that's breaking down frequently? Is there something I can do what's the term I'm looking for? I could track the breakdown type, what the repair was, and what component within the device or within the piece of equipment had to be repaired. And then I could do an analysis of that and see if there's any kind of trends, which, by the way, AI will help with greatly once we get Copilot embedded into products like Dynaway. And I don't know, to be honest, I'm a little behind. I don't know how far you guys are with that today, but you want it to do predictive analysis and say, hey, you've had 5 breakdowns in the fuse panel in the last 6 months. There might be something wrong fundamentally with it. Let's look a little deeper. Then the next thing that you have is you have the job shops, and the job shops are generally staff limited, not equipment limited. So they tend to have more equipment than they have staff. The staff can move around from one piece of equipment to another more easily. They lose track of doing preventive maintenance. They don't do it as often as they should, because if the lathe breaks down, there's a second lathe, and people aren't queued up at the lathe to do their work. The work isn't, the whip isn't sitting in front of it until it breaks down. And then when it breaks down, they're really in trouble. And I think actually a product like Dynaway is something that these companies should be looking at too, because they should be doing spot checks. They should put it into their schedule to have some basic preventive maintenance done. It might not have to be as aggressive as they do in the make to order, make to stock, where they're trying to run that equipment regularly and at a massive level. And then finally, I think we've got this opportunity now with IoT, and IoT is able to signal back into some central system, hey, your equipment's got a problem. Yeah. And you want that signal to come back and generate a repair ticket, a service ticket for your maintenance crew to be able to go and look at that in kind of like in real time without a human having to go look at the IoT and say, oh, there's a breakdown, but what is it? Which piece of equipment was it? And what am I supposed to do with it? You want that to flow right in. And you want that information also from the IoT device is often really helpful to a repair technician. So you want that to come into the ticket as well so that they can see all of that. I think Dynaway helps with everything I've just described immensely. And I believe that part of the conversation I would expect that I'm going to have at Dynaway Connect is going to be, okay, what kind of manufacturing company is going to be most likely to have IoT devices on their equipment that's going to be able to feed that back? Which ones need they need preventive maintenance that's well scheduled and really like has to fit into their scheduling because that production equipment's offline and unavailable, and they have to know, like the production scheduling team needs to know. And then who are the companies that need preventive maintenance, but it's less critical in the sense of interrupting production, et cetera, but more important in a way, because if that equipment goes offline, a job shop lives and dies by whether they can ship products.
Right.
And they will want to know well in advance, hey, the lathe might need a service in the next 6 months or 6 weeks or whatever. You don't want to be in the middle of something and have it break down.
Yeah. Wow. I have some insight into the agenda, and those are all things that we've already got sessions on and customers talking about. So I'm really excited about it. Whether it's fault analysis, like you were referring to, or IoT, I know there are a couple of sessions on those already. So, I think it's going to be a real exciting time. Maybe you guys need to tell me what
you want me to talk about. Maybe I can, you let me know. Hey, Rob, do you want to talk about Six Sigma and OEE and the benefits of that and how Dynaway can help with that? I'd be happy to talk about that.
Yeah.
Single minute exchange of dies. I don't know if Dynaway can help with that. I think it could. I actually think you guys probably could assist with that because you could schedule the die changes in Dynaway and what pieces of equipment are required and what what the timing will be of that die change, and Dynaway could be used to do that. I'd love to explore that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's the kind of thing those are the conversations that we often have at that kind of conference. Last question though. Kind of what's your experience with gatherings like this, conferences like this? Have you found it useful for customers to attend? What do they get out of it? How impactful are they to their organization? Why should they come to this kind of conference?
So I think there's like 3 reasons a customer comes to a conference like this. I think one reason is because they want to network with other customers who are like them, and they want to exchange best practices, ideas, things that are working for them, things that aren't working. What have other people done? And you're in a quiet place, if you will. It's not going to be quiet. I hope there's lots of fun and excitement, but you're in a place where you're not interrupted by the day-to-day of everyday work. And you're going to have a chance to have a sit down and conversation with different people. And you're going to be introduced to different organizations that you wouldn't have had a chance to. Okay. So that has value. The second thing is you're going to be exposed to Dynaway's new technologies and its announcements and Dynaway's partner organization, any partners who are working with Dynaway and what they're doing. And that's an educational opportunity to learn about features of the system that you're not using. You could end up with some features of Business Central being discussed that you didn't realize you could use. So it's not just within the narrow focus of what Dynaway can do. It could be you're having challenges with production and people like Sabre are attending, and maybe we have a session on general production concepts. If that's what would make the most sense, if we have those other things I was talking about already being discussed. And then I think the third opportunity is you may want a reality check on, am I working with the right people? Have I got the right support? And you are looking to see whether or not, in speaking to those other attendees, other customers that are like you, are you getting the level of support and service that you really need? And can you go back to your partner and can you talk to them and say, hey, I think I need you guys to be able to do this or that? and improve. So I think those three reasons are why I would go. It's not an expense by comparison to anything else. It's not really expensive.
Right.
The time is probably the hardest thing.
Yeah.
To make the time. But once again, if you could get a small improvement for your business, it's going to save you an hour a week.
Yeah.
That's 50 hours a year.
Yeah.
If that hour a week is per employee on the shop floor, and you got 20 employees on the shop floor, that's 1,000 hours a year. Mm-hmm. So you need to sort of evaluate it in terms of what's my potential benefit out of this. Mm-hmm. But the customers I've seen go to these conferences, they almost always come, I would say always come home with really good ideas, positive energy, and something that they're going to bring back to the business that's going to provide an overall improvement to business performance that they wouldn't have got if they hadn't gone to the conference.
Yeah, fantastic. Good. Well, Robert, I want to, I guess, wrap this up. Thank you for joining. Thanks for spending the time with us today. Look forward to hearing you speak at Connect and working with you a little bit. I want to say to our listeners out there, thanks for joining again. Please follow, rate us on the podcast platform of your choice. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Dynaway Dialogues. Have a great day.